the 2023 season, the San Diego Padres went 82-80. In the following offseason, they lost their best hitter, Juan Soto, their best starting pitcher, Blake Snell, and their best relief pitcher, Josh Hader. In accordance, I thought it was going to be a rough 2024 season in San Diego. However, on Tuesday, September 24th, the Padres took down the Dodgers 4-2 to clinch their spot as a National League wildcard team. So let's take a deeper look into how the Padres got to such a desperate position to begin with and how they turned it around.
High drive, deep right field, Merrill, madness! Walked off at Petco! Padres win it 3-2!
In the shortened 2020 COVID season, Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado, and the Slam Diego Padres came bursting onto the scene. In that 60-game season, they were one of the most fun teams to watch. However, they didn't have the pitching to go on a proper run, and they ended up getting swept by the eventual World Series champions, the Dodgers, 3-0 in that LDS. That following offseason, their front office thought they understood the assignment and went out and got plenty of pitching. They signed Yu Darvish to a 6-year, $108 million deal. They signed Joe Musgrove to a 5-year, $100 million deal. And they went out and traded 4 prospects to Tampa Bay Rays to get Blake Snell. And in 2021, it was supposed to be a great season for the Padres, but things just never clicked. Between injuries and all sorts of issues, the Padres just weren't good, and they ended up winning fewer than 80 games and missing the playoffs. The next season, 2022, things started to roll. The ball started to get rolling a little bit, and sure enough, at the deadline, they decided to go all in, and they sent a king's ransom to DC in exchange for Juan Soto. And at first, it seemed like it was enough. They beat the Mets in the National League wildcard series. Then they got their revenge on the Dodgers in the 2022 NLDS. However, it wasn't quite enough. They didn't quite have the juice, and they lost in the NLCS to the Phillies 4-1. And after the 2022 season, they understood that they were right on the doorstep. They were knocking in. So they decided to ensure that they take advantage of the championship window to go out and sign Xander Bogaerts to an 11-year, $280 million contract and hand Manny Machado an 11-year, $350 million contract extension. And that's when they crashed. They were supposed to be the best team in the MLB in 2023, but it just didn't work. Despite having the 3rd highest payroll, the Padres had the 15th best record and missed the playoffs. And it wasn't just that. When they gave out these big contracts, they were expected to be a great team to watch. And in September and October, they were relying on the revenue from jersey sales and from ticket sales and from TV deals in those big games in September and October. Because they were irrelevant late in the season, they didn't make nearly as much money as they had anticipated to make. And that put them in major financial issues. And last year at the end of the season, they had to take out a $50 million loan just to pay the players the contracts that they had already given out. The Padres were at an all-time low. And there was no getting out of it. Because they had no money to get new good players. And they couldn't rebuild because they traded away all their prospects to get Soto and Snell. And they couldn't tear it down and restart because they had given out long contracts, 5 years, 6 years, 11 years. And sure enough, in that free agency, their best pitcher, Snell, their best reliever, Josh Hader, both walked in free agency, and they're forced to trade away Juan Soto, and the Padres were at an all-time low. Entering the 2024 season, I expected it to be a rebuilding year for the Padres. But then they did something weird. They took Drew Thorpe, the top prospect they got in exchange for Juan Soto, and they traded him to the White Sox for Dylan Cease. And Dylan Cease is by far better than Thorpe. He's a great pitcher. However, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent after the 2025 season. And obviously, the Padres can't pay the players they already have. How are they going to pay him when he's up for a contract extension? So maybe they're going all in on this next 2 seasons. But then they did something contradicting. They signed veteran utility player Jefferson Profar and called up their top prospect Jackson Merrill, making it seem like maybe 2024 is going to be a rebuilding year. And then 5 weeks into the season, they did something contradicting again. They traded 3 prospects to the Marlins in exchange for a generational contact hitter, Luis Arraez. And Arraez is amazing. However, he's also going to be an unrestricted free agent after the 2025 season. And as we mentioned earlier, the Padres clearly can't pay these guys. So are they going all in? Are they rebuilding? What are they doing? And their season started off just as in the middle of nowhere as their moves. They weren't good, they weren't bad. They won exactly 50 out of their first 100 games. And then something magical began to happen. All these different moves that they made somehow all meshed together. Arise couldn't get out. Merrill and Profar became the clutchest hitters in baseball. And Dylan Cease started dealing. The Padres won 16 of their following 18 games and put themselves right back in the playoff conversation, right on the edge of a wild card spot. And then they started fighting. And then in September, it happened again. They got hot again. They won 14 of their first 18 games in September and clinched a playoff spot this week. So all of a sudden, the Padres are a playoff team. And the only question is, this time, will they get the job done in October? However, meanwhile, their previous financial issues that we discussed earlier, they began to solve themselves. So we see inflation has been crazy the past few years. The dollar has been dropping at an unusual rate. And inflation doesn't really impact the teams as much because the teams are always doing business. If the dollar's worth less, then the teams raise their ticket prices, raise their jersey prices, raise their TV deal prices. And they're always mixing and matching. So inflation doesn't really impact the team. However, it does impact the contracts. Because an 11-year contract that you signed 3 years ago, it doesn't matter if the dollar dropped, that 11-year contract is still the same. So the fact that the dollar has been dropping like nuts, lost 19% of its value in the last 5 years or so, is really benefiting the Padres, and it's saving them. They're right off the hook for 7% of Joe Musgrove's contract, 8% of Yu Darvish's contract, and 6.5% of Machado's contract, and 6.5% of Bogart's contract. And if Kamala Harris wins election, the dollar will continue to drop, and they'll be off the hook for more and more and more. So they're magically making the playoffs despite being in a weird rebuilding phase, and their financial issues are solving themselves. So the only question left is, they've reached October, what will they do in October? The 2023 playoffs, we saw 2 wildcard teams face off in the World Series, and that confirmed what we had already suspected. The best team in the regular season isn't necessarily the best team in the playoffs. Now, why is that? There are 2 factors that kind of mix together. The first factor is the rotation. Pitching rotation turns over every 5 days. In the regular season, you have 5 games every 5 days, so you need your entire pitching staff, all 5 days worth of pitchers, to be on their game. However, the playoffs, you have extra rest days. So you only pitch 3 games every 5 days. So only the top 60% of your rotation actually matters, which is a huge benefit to teams like the 2023 Rangers or 2023 Diamondbacks who have front-heavy pitching staffs. Because if you have a great front half of your pitching staff, horrible bottom half of your pitching staff, in the regular season, you're going to be up and down, you're going to be inconsistent, you'll probably scratch your way into the playoffs. However, once you get to the playoffs, only your great front half is going to be relevant, and then you're going to cruise in the postseason. And that segues into the next factor, the pitching splits. So sometimes we see in baseball, 2 teams will face off back-to-back days, and one day team will dominate, and the next day the other team will dominate. Why is that? Because each lineup matches up differently with different pitchers. Every baseball fan knows that when the pitcher and the hitter have the same strong hand, it's an advantage pitcher, and vice versa. So if a team has a bunch of righties, they'll be very good against a lefty, not as great against a righty. For example, a series between the Orioles and the Yankees in mid-June, where the first game of the series, Nestor Cortez, a lefty, pitched to an Orioles left-handed heavy team, and the Yankees won 14-2. 2 days later, Luis Gil, righty, pitched to the Orioles, and the Orioles won 17-5. That is a 14-run difference in a matter of 2 days. That shows you how much pitching splits actually have an impact on the game. So the same way your rotation changes, going from 5 out of 5 to 3 out of 5, so does the way your pitching splits line up with other lineups. So if we look at the Padres lineup, actually first let's look at the Padres rotation. The Padres, the front half of the rotation, their top 3 guys are Dylan Cease, Michael King, and Perez. Those are 3 guys that are going to be pitching for them in the playoffs. When those 3 guys pitch, the Padres win 63% of the time. When other guys pitch, the Padres win 54% of the time. The Padres have a big impact. It will be very beneficial for the Padres to get their rotation into the playoffs. And then the splits come into factor. The Padres lineup against left-handed pitching has a 689 OPS that ranks 19th in MLB. However, against right-handed pitching, they have a 768 OPS, which is 4th best in all of baseball. Since there are more righties than lefties in the world, there are more right-handed hitters. And then teams tend to try to beat that by stacking up on right-handed pitchers. So if we look at the competition in the NL, who are their top pitchers? Top competition in the NL, let's go with the Dodgers. Their top two pitchers going into the playoffs are Yamamoto and Buehler, both righties. The Phillies, their top two guys that helped them reach the World Series a couple of years ago, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, both righties. The D-backs, their top two guys that helped them reach the World Series last year, Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, both righties. The Brewers, their top three guys, Freddie Peralta, Colin Rea, and Tobias Myers, they're all righties. The Padres will dominate these righties. The Padres are tailored to make a run in the NL. Not only did the Padres make it into the playoffs, the Padres are about to shock the world in the playoffs. So going into the playoffs, not only are the Padres a good team, but they are my pick to be the Cinderella run this year. 10 months after being at despair, after we thought it was over, after losing Soto, Snell, and Bader, the San Diego Padres might just win it all. And credit where credit's due to GM Mike Schill and owner AJ Preller, because I did not think the Padres were going to be relevant, and especially not this soon.
Hydro!